This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. After being together for 3 years, my girlfriend still can't forget her first love. Her home has a locked room, a promise she made to her first love. As long as he comes back, there will always be a place for him in her home. She left me again and again for him. The last time, I only left a breakup message and vanished without a trace. She, however, went mad, searching for me everywhere. In the end, at the cemetery, she finally discovered the truth of everything. With reddened eyes, she pointed at the black and white photo of someone who resembled her by 80% and asked me, "Rocky, tell me, who do you always think of when you look at me?" On Hailey's birthday, I brought a few of her good friends home and prepared a surprise for her. As the party reached its peak, everyone egged us on to kiss. "Hailey, you should cherish such a considerate boyfriend." Hailey looked at me, her eyes shining brightly, and slowly leaned in. I lowered my head to cooperate. And just as the kiss was about to land with the cheers of friends in the background, the door was suddenly flung open. A man, drenched through, stood at the door. Hailey stood there stunned. I turned toward the door and saw a face that resembled mine by 60%. "Hailey," he called my girlfriend's name softly, intimate, familiar. Hailey looked somewhat dazed, and when she came to her senses, her face had already changed. "Why are you drenched? Go inside and change." The friends beside me reacted faster, greeting him as if it were the most natural thing. "Tony, why are you back so suddenly? Had enough fun?" The man stood in the doorway, showing a somewhat faint smile. "Long time no see." Hailey's gaze stayed fixed on him, not giving me a single glance. I wanted to ask who he was. Before I could speak, Tony walked straight up to the second floor. The room that Hailey's family had always kept locked, which she had emphasized countless times should never be approached. Tony deftly pulled out a key and unlocked the door with ease. When he came back downstairs, Tony had changed clothes and naturally took a seat at the vacant spot at the dining table. The friends, drunk, naturally draped their arms over Tony's shoulder. "Shige, stay a bit longer this time. After all, Hailey's home will always have a room for you." "How nice, always having someone as your solid support. I say, why don't you two just get married?" Hailey cleared her throat. She leaned closer to me, trying to break the awkwardness. "Rocky, thank you for celebrating my birthday today." The scent of lilies surrounded me, but I felt a chill. I had always known that Hailey had a deep, unforgettable first love, Tony. When Hailey's company was just starting, Tony had quit his high-paying job at a foreign company and became her steadfast support. Even though Tony had been gone for years, Hailey's friends still treated him warmly. They laughed and talked about old stories. I picked up my chopsticks, took a bite of the food, but couldn't taste anything. This celebration that belonged to them lasted until 10 in the evening. When we parted ways, it was pouring rain. In the end, only the three of us were left in the house. Hailey's face was flushed from the alcohol, her head resting on Tony's shoulder, like a little bird depending on him. The official boyfriend, felt like air. "I'll take you to the hotel. I'm not leaving." Tony's voice was cold. "That room is mine. You said so. No matter what, there will always be a room for me in your home." I felt like an inconsequential backdrop, ignored by them. Hailey, silent, looked at me with a pleading expression. "Let him stay. It's going to rain heavily outside. Just for one night, okay?" Hailey looked at me, her gaze wavering, with a hint of apology. "Rocky, I'm sorry. I bit my lip and, bypassing them, went upstairs. That night, I slept uneasily. The heavy rain fell all night, and a thunderclap woke me up. I instinctively wanted to embrace someone beside me, but found nothing, only a cold void. A sliver of light came through the gap in the door. I opened a crack to look outside. The living room was brightly lit. Tony was wearing an apron, bringing out a bowl of noodles, placing it on the coffee table with steam rising. He looked like the master of the house. I saw him smiling indulgently, his voice gentle. "You're still the same. You're scared of thunder and need someone to keep you company." Hailey was smiling, standing beside him. Tony held her from behind. I clearly saw Hailey's body stiffen for a moment, but she didn't push him away. The warm light from the living room bathed them, inadvertently revealing a touch of warmth, like a pair of lovers forever out of reach for outsiders. I met Hailey when I was 22. After graduating, I joined her company. My desk was in front of her office, and whenever her office door was not firmly closed, I would sneak a peek through the tiny gap. At that face, which had appeared in my dreams countless times, a face that was 70% like mine. They really looked alike, especially the dimples at the corners of their mouths when they smiled. Later, my colleague Peter discovered this. When he slapped an iced coffee against my face, I was startled. Turning to meet his eyes, "Dude," he smiled, handed me the coffee, and casually said, "Don't fall for CEO Hailey. She has someone in her heart." I blinked. He leaned into gossip. "Hailey has an unforgettable unforgettable first love. I don't know how long they were together, but I think they knew each other since school. When the company was just starting, they were still together, and he would occasionally come to the company to bring Hailey lunch. Once, during a meeting, Hailey got a call, and hearing he was sick, she immediately left. Such a workaholic person would also leave work for her boyfriend. Romantic, right? I held the coffee and asked softly, "What happened later?" They broke up later. I don't know the details, but Hailey still misses him. She even keeps his photo on her desk. Peter shrugged and smiled. Her first love probably hasn't moved on either. Love but unable to be together, like a novel's tragic beauty. Hearing this, I was stunned. The door to Hailey's office suddenly opened, and the secretary walked out. "Rockey, Hailey wants to see you." When I entered, Hailey was looking at documents. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. A pair of small dimples appeared at the corners of her mouth. My gaze fell on a framed photo on her desk, staring fixedly, my mind full of Peter's lamenting expression. "Rockey, will you be my boyfriend?" Hailey suddenly spoke up. My thoughts were interrupted, and I instinctively replied, "Okay." When I came to, I met Hailey's eyes. She looked at me with the documents in her hands, her eyes holding a tranquil sea. Suddenly, she smiled again, with a mix of tolerance and tenderness. My heart exploded suddenly. My ears were filled with the pounding sound of my heartbeat. For the first time since that person's death, I felt that I was still alive. In the middle of the night, restless and unable to sleep, I woke up with a lingering headache. I instinctively reached for my phone to check the time. Opening my eyes, I saw Hailey's smiling face. Her eyebrows curved, her dimples shallow. My heart skipped a beat, and the wound from last night's key still ached. Hailey gently snuggled into my arms, her tone tender. "Rockey." The faint, clear scent of lilies enveloped me again, and Hailey's hand rested on my waist. She sighed again. "Why aren't you angry? You must want something from me." I lowered my eyes and turned to hold her. I pressed my forehead against her chest and sighed softly. "I don't want your money. I don't want your love. Hailey, all I want is to see you. Just to see you. That's enough." When I left the house, I noticed that Tony's room wasn't locked. Hailey subtly blocked my view and kissed me softly. I swallowed my question. The weather forecast showed a sun and a cloud, but as it neared the end of the workday, it abruptly switched to heavy rain. Hailey didn't come to the office today. I texted her, asking if she was available. "Could you come to the office to pick me up?" The message remained unanswered until I was nearly done with the project on my computer. The message interface only showed the green box I had sent. I gathered my things and headed downstairs. The rain was pouring heavily, splashing back up and soaking my pants. The wind made my legs feel icy. Thunder roared, accompanied by lightning that suddenly split the sky. I was startled and took a couple of steps back. The scene from yesterday overlapped with now, reminding me, Tony is afraid of thunder. The message had been sent an hour and a half ago. Hailey would never have been this late in replying before. I dialed her number. After about half a minute of ringing, someone picked up the phone, but it wasn't Hailey. The male voice on the other end sounded leisurely. "Hello." The cold wind made me sneeze. "Where is Hailey?" Tony hesitated for a moment before replying. "She's making ginger soup. I got a bit wet when I came back." The rain continued to pour heavily. I suppressed my agitation and calmly said, "Could you ask her to come to the office to pick me up? I don't have an umbrella." There was silence on the other end for a while. "Sorry, I'm a bit scared. I'll have her come when the thunder stops." The roles between us seemed to have suddenly reversed. I couldn't tell who was really Hailey's boyfriend. "Then could you give the phone to her?" The person on the other end put the call on speaker and called out, "Tony, your boyfriend said he doesn't have an umbrella. Could you go pick him up?" After the call, there was silence, followed by some rustling sounds. Tony quietly added, "Not to me, but I don't want you to go." Another awkward silence. After a long while, it seemed like Hailey took the call and sighed softly. "Rockey, I'm sorry. I'll come pick you up later. Please wait for me at the office." The call was ended. The damp weather could stir up many unpleasant memories, even making the old scars on my arms ache faintly. In this seemingly endless heavy rain, I suddenly realized that I might not be able to wait for Hailey. I waited until late at night, when everyone in the office had left, before someone finally came to pick me up. It wasn't Hailey. A familiar car stopped at the company entrance. The door opened to reveal Alice's face. Hailey's friend. Alice and I weren't very familiar. After getting in the car, I thanked her and leaned against the side, my limbs icy. My head had grown dizzy from the cold wind. After driving for a while, Alice suddenly spoke. She can't let go. I looked up and met her eyes in the rearview mirror. my mind muddled. Hailey asked me to pick you up and not come herself because she's with Tony. I didn't know how to respond and instinctively tried to smile. You figured it out. Alice smiled. After all these years of breaking up and getting back together, if it could have ended, it would have. She looked at me through the rearview mirror, her red lips slightly pursed. I was stunned. Then why aren't they together? Because Tony has a thorn in his heart. Hailey offended people when she started her business, and it came back to harm Tony. Just when he was delayed, he missed seeing his mother for the last time. He has a barrier in his heart, a mix of love and hate that he can't cross. And Hailey owes him, always feeling guilty toward him. So, do you understand? Her tone was very calm, like a sharp knife, cutting through my flesh silently. You can never insert yourself between them. I didn't speak and looked away. I watched the continuous stream of vehicles outside the window and the winding rain streaks on the car window. But what I thought of was that day. Not long after I joined, I landed a big deal, and my colleagues egged me on to treat everyone. Hailey happened to pass by. The company atmosphere was good, and a colleague boldly asked if she was coming. Hailey looked at me, smiling with her eyes curved. I met her gaze. Everyone was just joking, knowing that Hailey rarely mingled in personal matters. But she looked at me, her smile like a spring breeze, and answered unusually, "Sure." My heart skipped a beat. Later, Hailey paid for that meal. As she was leaving to pay at the front desk, I happened to run into her after she had finished paying. "I'll transfer the money." Hailey stopped my hand, her voice gentle. "No need." "That's not right, Hailey. We agreed from the start that I would treat." I tried to unlock my phone, but Hailey looked down at me, her eyes showing a hint of tenderness. "Then you can treat again next time." I looked up in surprise and met her eyes, which seemed to be veiled in a mist. Her gaze clearly fell on me, but she wasn't looking at me. She smiled slyly. I was stunned and said, "Okay." I was very familiar with Hailey's gaze, seeing through me to another person. I knew, but it didn't matter. Later, Hailey admitted that it was a deliberate move, using the opportunity to ask me out. After we started dating, she curled up in my arms and smiled like a little fox, saying, "The moment you agreed that day, I knew you couldn't escape my grasp." "Rocky," she said, "the first time I saw you, I liked you." When Alice's car reached the bottom of my building, the rain had lessened a lot. She held an umbrella and helped me out of the car, seeing me to the door. "By the way, if you really break up with her, it would be awkward to still work at her company. You can come find me." She pulled out a business card from her pocket. I reached out to take it. "Are you trying to steal her boyfriend?" Alice looked completely composed. "Putting aside other matters, your workability is exceptional. Anywhere you go, people will want you. It's better if I reserve you in advance." Before I could reply, Hailey's voice suddenly came from behind, cold. "He won't go." Caught red-handed with friends trying to steal a boyfriend. But it's okay. The awkwardness isn't mine. Alice smiled and didn't respond, turning to get back into the car. Hailey grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my flesh. My limbs were icy, but the spot she held felt warm. A vein in my temple throbbed, my head pounding. I looked at Hailey and said seriously, "Let's break up." "No." She refused without hesitation. Hailey's face looked bad, her brows furrowed. "Is it because of Tony? He's leaving tomorrow. You don't need to because of him." Her voice grew distant. My head hurt so much that I had no energy to argue with her. In the last second before losing consciousness, I saw a blurred figure rushing toward me. So familiar. It made me instinctively blurt out, "Serena." Perhaps it was because of the rain and the cold wind. My body, which was already not in good shape, quickly came down with a fever. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Hailey on the phone. "Sorry, I have something to do today. He's sick. I need to take care of him." The drowsiness overwhelmed me again. I drifted back to sleep, and someone replaced the towel on my forehead. I don't know when I woke up again. I woke up because I was thirsty. My throat was painfully dry. The towel on my forehead seemed to be dry, and the high fever had left me completely weak. I tried to call out to Hailey, but couldn't make a sound. She wasn't in the room. The water glass was at the edge of the nightstand. I tried hard to prop myself up to reach it, with little strength in my limbs. As I moved to the edge of the bed, the blanket suddenly slid away. I knocked over the glass of water and fell heavily to the floor. My body felt like it had fallen apart and everywhere hurt, but no one came to help me. When my mind was delirious from the fever, she appeared. She had a face that was 8 parts similar to Hailey's, with shallow dimples when she smiled. She smiled and called out to me. "Rocky," she said, "you need to live well." I wanted to call her name, but my throat was cracked with pain, and I couldn't utter a syllable. "Serena, don't go." "Serena." I woke up in the hospital with my body temperature having dropped a bit. Opening my eyes, I saw the white ceiling, the 4 drip, and Hailey. When she saw I was awake, her brows relaxed slightly, and she poured me a cup of water. The pain in my throat finally eased. "Rocky, your fever was quite severe this time." Her expression was somewhat strange, though her voice was still gentle. "I came back and found you weren't in bed. How did you suddenly fall off? I didn't speak. Her gaze fell on the hand I was getting an injection in, and she spoke softly. Rockey, your hand. Why are there so many scars? I lowered my eyes. The crisscrossing scars on my arm looked like ugly insects. I avoided the topic and asked her in return, where did you go? I clearly heard her say she would take care of me at home. She paused for a moment. Something suddenly came up at the company. Liar. I actually heard it. On the first night Tony came back, he coquettishly asked her to accompany him to a place of entertainment. The date was today. Call Tony. Hailey was stunned. I stared at her, and she didn't move. I raised it for the second time. Let's break up. No. She refused without hesitation. She grabbed the hand that wasn't receiving the four, holding it tightly. Rockey, we're not breaking up. What about Tony? I spoke calmly. He's getting married. Hailey's voice was somewhat hesitant. His parents arranged a blind date for him. They're a good match, and the wedding date is set. He just came back to have a look, and he's leaving today to get married. Hailey's face was like a sea in shadow, obscure and hard to see clearly. But I could clearly see a hint of red spreading at the corner of her eye. I had a feeling I was playing an unappealing role in this story, like a villainous second male lead in a tale of true love. I knew I should be angry, but looking at Hailey's face, all my anger dissipated. I sighed. I didn't bring it up again. Since that day, Tony seemed to have truly vanished from my life. The locked room was once again sealed off, as if it had never been opened. Hailey and I seemed to have returned to the past, but locking it up didn't mean sealing it away. One day, the matching key would still open that door. I encountered Tony while on a business trip in another city. I knew he didn't really regard me highly. As long as he was around, he would always be Hailey's priority, so he didn't need to look at me directly to make me fall apart. He suddenly appeared during a meal at the hotel, sitting across from me without any courtesy. I was somewhat taken aback. What a coincidence. Tony curled his lips into a smile. Not a coincidence. I learned about your schedule from Hailey and specifically came to find you. His gaze fell on my face, somewhat floating. At first glance, you do look quite similar. I knew he was talking about me and him and didn't respond. Tony didn't care about my silence and met my eyes. Do you love Hailey? I remained silent. He smiled. I'm angry and can't let go, so I thought of torturing each other with her. After Hailey and I broke up, she didn't find anyone else. I was a bit surprised when I heard she was with you. Later, they showed me your photos. Tony's eyes shifted, and he looked somewhat pleased, rather than her finding a substitute. What pleases me more is that she can never let go of me. He smiled with a proud expression, his gaze towards me carrying an arrogant favoritism. So, I decided not to let go. Rockey, I'm gonna take her back. I returned from my business trip 4 days later. When Hailey picked me up at the airport, she also brought my favorite dessert. I tiredly set it aside. Hailey didn't mind, looking at me with a smile. Hailey, shall we have a world of just the two of us? I'll give you time off. Go out and see. Before she could finish, the sudden ringing of her phone interrupted her. The contact name was clearly visible, Tony. Hailey instinctively looked at me. I averted my eyes and reached for my headphones, but she was quicker, grabbing my hand. In the next moment, she pressed the answer and speaker buttons. Tony's voice came from the other end. Hailey, I'm getting married this month on the 8th. Can you come? Hailey's gaze was fixed on my eyes. I looked down, hiding the emotions in my eyes. After a while, I heard her say, okay, Tony's wedding was something Hailey and I attended together. I intended to go to the office, but her attitude was unexpectedly firm. Rockey, you are my boyfriend. Boyfriend, or just a second choice substitute. I didn't ask her, because we were both just as contemptible. Tony's wedding was lively, with many guests and beautiful decorations. When I sat down, I heard the people at the neighboring table discussing the bride. You wouldn't believe it, Alice really likes him. She designed the wedding herself and oversaw every detail. I pursed my lips and looked sideways to find Hailey's smiling eyes. She smiled a bit mischievously, as if she had overheard their conversation. Rockey, what kind of wedding do you like? I hadn't thought about it. Weddings and the rest of my life. To me, it has always been an unknown blank. I used to think that as long as the person was by my side, I'd be happy to spend my life that way. But then I stopped thinking about it. Hailey didn't wait for my answer and lightly tapped my forehead. If we get married, it will all be according to what you want, okay? We weren't going to get married. I instinctively wanted to say it out loud, but the person on stage spoke first. The microphone buzzed, mixed with the emotional voice of a man, echoing loudly in the venue. Hailey, I don't want to marry her. If you're willing, we can leave right now. All eyes followed Tony's gaze, filled with shock, mockery, anger, countless emotions pressing down on us. My heart felt like it was under the highest pressure in an instant. The noise in my ears was non-existent. Breathing became difficult. Tony looked at Hailey, as if they were star-crossed lovers separated by a galaxy. He looked down at her, filled with deep emotion. Hailey, I've made up my mind. I don't care about the past. As long as you're willing today, we'll be together. I don't want to marry someone else. I don't want to spend my life with someone I don't love. I love you. Hailey, let's leave together, okay? The room was in an uproar. I saw someone's elder shouting and trying to stop him. The voices surged like a tide, gradually engulfing us. I looked at Hailey. Her hand was gripping tightly, as if she was struggling to endure something. The pain in her wrist spread, but the long-forgotten suffocation left me speechless. In the next moment, she suddenly let go of my hand. I watched her stand up and run towards Tony. The crowd was dense, but they were getting closer. I saw her grab Tony's hand, and through the surging sea of people, they left holding hands. I saw the smile at the corner of Tony's lips, and the murmurs from all directions. I heard people cursing Tony for ruining the wedding, cursing Hailey for being an ex who shouldn't have come, cursing me for not managing my girlfriend well. The pressure in my heart felt like it was about to explode, but I just stared blankly at where they had disappeared. How envious. Hailey held Tony's hand and led him out of the venue. There were people chasing after them. She floored the accelerator and sped away. The car was silent inside. Tony didn't speak, but the smile on his face never faded. Hailey didn't know where to go. Her mind was a tangled mess, impossible to untangle or cut away. When she parked, she realized she had brought Tony back to her home. Tony opened the locked room, changed clothes, and found Hailey sitting on the sofa smoking. Hailey had quit smoking a long time ago. It was after he left that she had stopped. The curling white smoke blurred half of her face, and the smoke irritated Tony, making him uneasy. He walked over to hug Hailey, intending to kiss her, but she avoided him. His lips barely brushed her face. Tony was stunned, but she said nothing, picking up her phone to dial a number. Tony, sharp-eyed, saw the contact name, Rockey. Without thinking, he grabbed her hand, stopping her from dialing. "What are you doing, Tony?" Hailey frowned, her face showing a frustration Tony had never seen before. "Calling my boyfriend." Tony was stunned, the earlier joy completely gone. "Hailey, he's like me." She looked up, meeting Tony's gaze without denying it. "You're with him because he's like me, aren't you? You've taken me away. He's just a substitute. I'm back now. I'll always be by your side from now on. Hailey, I've forgiven you. Let's go back to how things were, okay?" Hailey looked at him, her face expressionless, with the white smoke blurring half of her profile. But Tony still clearly saw the coldness on the other half of her face. She said, "No, Tony, I owe you. You don't want to marry, so I'll be with you. But you shouldn't have put your family, your fiancé, and my boyfriend in such a difficult position in front of everyone. Because I owe you, I chose to first consider your feelings." "But Tony," her eyes were sharply defined, "I no longer love you." Tony's emotions collapsed suddenly, like sand scattered by the wind. "But you owe me." "Hailey, you'll never repay what you owe me in this lifetime." Hailey didn't respond, continuing to make the call. On the other end, a mechanical voice kept repeating, "Sorry, the number you have dialed." She became agitated, and in the brief moment of relief, tried to make a voice call to Rockey. But there was an unread message on WeChat. It was from Rockey, sent just minutes ago. "We've broken up." Her emotions crossed the threshold. Hailey got up and walked towards the door, intending to find Rockey at the venue. Tony suddenly laughed. "Do you think he really likes you, Hailey? He doesn't love you at all? A person who truly loves you wouldn't be so magnanimous to let their ex stay in the same room." Hailey didn't look back, heading for the door. Tony laughed behind her, and as he laughed, he began to cry. "You're treating him as a stand-in. How do you know that you're not someone else's stand-in?" Hailey suddenly turned around, striding over to grab Tony's shoulders. "What do you know?" Tony looked at her, tears mixed with his laughter. "I won't tell you. Hailey, I just want you to suffer." Rockey's phone continued to go unanswered. The HR department said he had taken a long leave. Hailey asked everyone who knew him, but no one knew where he had gone. For the first time, Hailey felt frustrated, like solving a complex math problem with the proof full of scribbles. But she couldn't find the final solution. On the 10th day of Rockey's leave, another rainy day, Hailey happened to run into Peter downstairs. Peter looked at her in surprise and asked, "Hailey, have you and Rockey broken up?" Hailey wanted to say no, but she was left speechless. Peter turned his gaze to the torrential rain outside, and after a long silence, said, "You're much luckier than he is. Rockey has a contradictory presence. When Hailey first met him, she momentarily momentarily mistook him for the old Tony. She admitted that this similarity stirred her feelings, but as time passed, she realized he was nothing like Tony. Rockey is very gentle with people, always smiling at everyone. But sometimes, when she sees him alone, he seems like a soulless puppet, expressionless. Then, the moment she calls his name, he springs to life. Even after they began their relationship, their intimate gestures were few. Rockey wasn't natural in his closeness. He was too slow and too reserved. The most boundary-crossing thing they did was a kiss she placed on his face. She thought he was just shy, yet he would often stand at a distance, watching her daydream. Hailey had caught that gaze by chance. It felt like falling into an endless snowy field. The things inside were too mixed and tangled. The only thing visible was the overwhelming love that fell like a blanket. She thought he loved her. Little did she know, they were both deceivers. She knew nothing about his past. Like his indifferent emotions, his avoided discussions about family, and his scattered scars. These clear red flags. She was completely unaware of them. 2 days before Rockey's leave was about to end, Hailey went to the cemetery Peter had mentioned. The staff at the entrance looked momentarily blank when they saw her and blurted out a name. Serena. Hailey frowned. A middle-aged man scratched his head, apologetically saying, "Sorry, you must be here to visit her, right? She must be the twin sister?" Hailey didn't answer, but instead asked, "How do you remember her?" She smiled slightly. "I've worked here for 3 years. A young man comes every week, rain or shine. He's never missed a single visit." She was curious and wanted to know who was buried there. A girl in her 20s, with shallow dimples when she smiled. That's how he remembered her. Hailey's expression was not good. She found Serena's location and walked towards it. The wind howled through the cemetery. A figure stood before Serena's grave. Rockey's thin frame looked somewhat forlorn. Among the many graves, he seemed like a marker of a different kind. She spoke. "Rockey." The moment I turned around, the glaring halo made the person blurry. I thought it was her. It seemed a bit amusing in retrospect. Death cannot be undone. That's the simplest fact. Seeing Hailey clearly was surprising. Hailey, always calm, usually smiling at me, with the dimples at her lips just like Serena's. But this time, she wasn't smiling, her gaze fixed on the black and white photo behind me. After a long pause, her voice came out like a sluggish stream. "Rockey, when you look at me, what do you think about? What do I think about?" In every moment I peered through the door at Hailey. In every time I watched her outline and daydreamed. I imagined her as a portrayal of my Serena. If she hadn't died, if she had survived, what would she have been like? I grew up in a narrow alley in a city village. My childhood was filled with adults mixing foul language with gossip, the stench of rotting sewage, ever-present flies, and a drunk father with an indifferent mother. The boundary between life and death was not clear to me. When my parents beat me to the point of losing consciousness, I heard my mother stop my father, saying, "Don't kill him." What I thought was, it's better to be dead. Strangely enough, they were afraid others would notice, so they wouldn't leave marks in visible places. But as I grew older, they were no longer content with just being violent at home. They needed to assert their authority even outside. I was beaten and scolded in front of others, stripped of any dignity. I seemed to be born to repay their debt, but it didn't really matter because I got used to it. At 15, I stood on the edge of a 5-story building, the wind howling. At that moment, I also had the thought, maybe I should just jump. Then Serena appeared. Someone suddenly grabbed my wrist and pulled me back. In the end, we tumbled together, the rough ground cutting 2 lines on Serena's hand. I, held by her, remained unscathed. When she let go, she sighed and admonished me. Don't think of doing something foolish. But when she met my eyes, she fell silent, a misplaced blush climbing her face. "Rockey, why? Why are you here? Who doesn't know the top student?" she said, her voice softening. "Why were you standing?" I ignored her, getting up from the ground and walking away. She called after me, but I didn't look back. I didn't know how to interact with people and was used to being alone. Serena, however, was like an NPC in an RPG game that you can't shake off until you complete the quest. Since that day, she began to seek me out deliberately. I wasn't used to interacting with others. I didn't dislike it. Just years of experience made me instinctively avoid it. Serena kept appearing on my task panel, gradually becoming a daily task. Rockey's life was marked by contradictions. When his father came home, he happened to run into him on the way back from school. The man, reeking of alcohol, came up to him and raised his hand high, striking Rockey's face with a heavy blow. The people at the alleyway corner were used to such scenes. They glanced over, whispered among themselves, and then moved on to the next gossip topic. Rockey lowered his gaze, his father cursing him as he left. "Seeing you just makes me sick." After venting his anger, he walked away unsteadily, leaving Rockey with a stinging face and a burning pain. He looked up, and there, in the crowd, were Serena's eyes. She looked somewhat stunned, lifting the book in her hand, about to call out to him. But then she fell silent when she saw the pain on his face. Serena took him to her home, where it was just her and her grandmother. She dampened a towel and placed it on Rocky's face, asking, "Who did this to you?" "My dad." Serena was silent for a moment, her voice a bit strained. "Does he often do this to you?" Rockey didn't answer. Serena's gaze fell on his long-sleeved shirt. He zipped it up and said, "Don't ask." There was a moment of tense silence. Serena's heartbeat seemed erratic and loud in the quiet. After a long while, she suddenly took his hand and said, "Rockey, let's run away. After the college entrance exams, we'll choose a university far from here. Let's escape this horrible place." The damp smell from the small courtyard mixed with the nauseating stench of smoke and alcohol. The setting sun bathed Serena's shoulder. Her smile was somewhat strained, with her dimples barely visible. Rockey pressed the towel against his face and replied, "All right." Serena accompanied him to and from school, using the pretext of tutoring to lure him to her home. Her grandmother made him delicious meals. Serena was smart, but not focused on studying, so Rockey helped her, and her grades gradually improved. Eventually, they both took the college entrance exams. On the day the results came out, Serena, overjoyed, dragged him out to celebrate. They ran through the streets and alleys, shouting, "Rockey, second in the province. Now you can go wherever you want." They bought a small cake together. The candle's flame reflected in her eyes, like a burning fire, warming Rocky's heart. "Where do you want to go?" "I haven't decided." "Then take your time. When you've decided, tell me, and I'll go with you." Serena was like a flame, making Rockey feel warm when he was near, almost as if he was ignited by it. But before the flame could fully catch, it was extinguished. A media outlet from the province came to interview him, which he declined. Perhaps they had seen him being berated by his drunken father that day. Serena didn't seek him out anymore. She roamed the neighborhoods. His life, observed with cold indifference for years, became fodder for others to gawk at. They exaggerated his parents' abuse, depicting his life as a tragedy, and after some embellishment, it became a topic of gossip. This news caused a sensation, drawing countless media outlets. They intrusively invaded his life, and everyone pointed at him, saying, "That's the poor child. His parents treated him like that, and yet he performed so well. You should learn from him." His parents were overwhelmed by the attention. They seemed to suffer retribution, receiving scorn from others and criticism from their workplace. But scum never repent, so everything ended up escalating further, falling back on Rockey. When they kicked him out, it was a rainy day. His father shouted, "Ungrateful wretch, get out, don't come back." The neighbors whispered, gathering around to watch, but no one offered help. 18 years of suffering reached its peak in that moment, crushing the last psychological barrier Rockey had. Then Serena appeared. She pushed through the crowd without hesitation and took his hand. "Rockey, it's okay. I'll take you away. Don't be afraid, Rockey. I'm here." Rockey fell ill. Serena took him back to her home. With only 2 rooms, she gave hers to him and slept with her grandmother. Rockey locked himself in the room, drawing the thick curtains and curling up in the darkness. Old scars felt like worms crawling over his body, consuming his nerves. He couldn't stand any light. Sometimes he would go mad, using sharp nails to scratch his arms until they bled, then coming back to his senses, like someone awakening from a nightmare, unaware of his actions moments before. Serena applied medicine to his wounds in the dark. Sometimes he would remain silent, letting her tend to him. Other times, he would suddenly lash out, knocking the medicine from her hands and tearing at the newly healed scabs. The blood on his arms would start flowing again. In the pitch-black room, only Serena's eyes held a faint light. She suddenly rushed over, holding him tightly. He was trapped in her embrace, wanting to move but afraid of hurting her. Unable to feel the pain, he bit into her shoulder. Serena said nothing, only holding him until his madness subsided. The room was filled with an unbearable silence. "Serena, Rockey," she interrupted him, burying her head in his neck, her hands trembling. He noticed the wetness on his collar like falling sparks, burning him almost unbearably. "It's okay. It's okay," she repeated, not sure if she was comforting him or herself. "You're just sick. It's like having a cold. As long as we go to the hospital, take the medicine, and listen to the doctors, we'll get better. We'll definitely get better." In the room's darkness, the mingled smells of blood and Serena's lavender-scented laundry detergent filled the air, along with the faint dust floating around. Her body, heavy and hot, pressed against him. He could even feel her heart beating vigorously. Strangely, when he was beaten by his parents and could barely make a sound, he didn't cry. When they slapped him in front of his classmates at school, he didn't cry. When everyone looked at him with strange eyes and he was kicked out of his home, he didn't cry either. But the warm liquid streaking down his face clearly told him that he was crying. Tears were salty. Instinctively, he reached to wipe them away, but Serena held him tighter. The sound of her heartbeat roared in his ears, not just hers. He closed his eyes and wrapped his arms around her waist, saying, "Yes, I'm just sick." When Serena first took me to the hospital, she was fully equipped, wrapped up tight, but I still had an episode halfway there. She shielded me from most of the strange looks, softly whispering, "Rocky, I'm here. Don't be afraid, Rocky." When I came to my senses, I met her gaze. Her almond-shaped eyes had a hint of moisture. Not embarrassment, but tenderness. I immediately became calm. The doctor said I needed to be hospitalized, but we didn't have that much money. He then prescribed me medication. Antidepressants are not cheap. It was a long and dreary vacation. Serena worked part-time every day, coming and going, while also supervising me to take my medicine and setting up appointments with a therapist. She got quite a tan, but her eyes remained bright. I was able to go out, but I was still afraid of crowded places. In the evening, Serena would come back and see me in the yard with Grandma, picking vegetables. "Rocky, did you take your medicine today?" When she smiled, it was like she was glowing. I washed my hands and said, "I did. By the way, a tutor from a cram school came to see me, wanting me to give extra lessons." She was momentarily stunned. "You?" I agreed. The tutor was the second best in the province, and the price was not low. "I'm just sick, Serena. I will get better." She seemed like a clock suddenly moving slowly, and after a while, she smiled again, her dimples appearing. "Yes, Rocky, it will get better." As the summer vacation was ending, my condition was under control. Serena didn't work part-time much anymore. She saved up some money and was thinking about starting a business. Serena's grades were good enough for a top university, but she still chose the same place as me. After starting college, we met every weekend, spending 4 yuan for a 2-hour bus ride. When we were together, time passed quickly. Eventually, I no longer needed medication. Serena came to visit me. My roommate occasionally teased me about her while she was waiting for me at the school gate. He came up and jokingly asked her, "Classmate, what's your relationship with our Rocky?" Serena was momentarily stunned, her ears turning slightly red. I stood beside her, wanting to laugh inexplicably. She opened her mouth and answered, as if struggling a bit, "Sister. I'm his sister." My roommate was somewhat disinterested. I stood there, feeling like my heart had skipped a beat. I was born precocious, with a good memory, always able to solve problems that others couldn't. But there were many things I didn't understand. No one told me why, even though I initially avoided Serena's contact. I felt happy whenever she greeted me with a smile. Why? Even when I didn't feel sad, did I still cry? Why? I couldn't understand. Serena noticed something was wrong with me after only a few steps and asked, "What's wrong?" I stopped and asked her directly, "Why did you lie?" She was taken aback, then smiled, her smile carrying a bit of naive mischief. "Aren't we family? I'm a month younger than you, so you're really my older brother." I was stunned by the word, slowly digesting its meaning. Family? Doesn't it count? Serena's face turned a bit red, her voice assertive. "We live together. Grandma likes you, and I like you. Don't you like me, us?" "Yes." I looked into her eyes. I answered very seriously. "I like Grandma and I like Serena. I like that Grandma makes me pumpkin cakes, calls me a good child, says I'm too thin, and tells me to eat more. I like Serena's bright eyes calling me Serena, like her telling me she's always there, like her saying, we are family, not just the parents who would scold and hit me, but those who smile gently at me, even if there's no blood relation. We are family. Serena, you are a very, very important family to me." Serena was stunned for a moment, her face showing a fleeting disappointment, which quickly disappeared. She then gently touched my shoulder. "You are too, Rocky." At that time, I believed it to be true. So, in the following years, I repeatedly thought, if only I had realized earlier, if only I had understood Serena's reddened ears sooner, if only I had told her back then. My feelings for her were more than just family. Perhaps there would have been less regret between us. So, what happened later? Peter opened another bottle of wine, hesitatingly asking me. Later, I stood up, knocking over the wine bottle on the ground, stepping on the scattered caps. My memory is good, remembering everything clearly, except for that period on the timeline, which felt like a deliberately erased part on a ruler. I didn't look at him, my gaze falling on the dimming light outside the window, and after a while, I answered off topic. Do you remember? 5 years ago, there was a news story. Just before the new year, a car collided with pedestrians, causing 6 deaths and 12 injuries. Peter was taken aback, grabbing his phone to search. I closed my eyes. The intentionally forgotten memories resurfaced. The speeding car, the deafening sound, the scattered crowd, and the pain of being forcefully pushed away at the waist. Then the sudden outburst of screams and cries. Someone rushed to hug a motionless child on the road. Someone crazily ran into the middle of the street. Everything finally froze on that ever-flowing pool of blood. Serena bled so much. Does a human body have that much blood? I don't know. Time accelerated forward. The ambulance arrived. She was taken into the emergency room. The light on the door went on and off. On and off. I lost count of how many times she was taken in over those days. I only remember the dim lights in the hospital corridor. The night was very cold. I counted the tiles in that corridor over and over, from one end to the other, then from the other end back. Sometimes one more, sometimes one less. In the end, I never did count them all. When the light went out for the last time, the doctor came out and shook his head at me. He said, "Say a few more words." When I went in, Serena's eyes were half open, looking towards the door. The respirator covered most of her face, and the blood smell was very strong. When she saw me, she seemed to want to smile, but lifting her eyes seemed to be a bit difficult. I realized she had turned quite pale, gentle and serene, like a sickly princess from a European fairy tale. Serena tried to move her mouth, but couldn't make a sound. I removed her respirator. She fell silent again. She tried to lift her hand with great effort, trembling. I knelt beside her bed, resting my face on its edge. Serena reached out, slowly, gently, cautiously, placing her hand on my brow, as if caressing a precious silk or engraving something into my very bones. Her fingertips traced my eyebrows, inch by inch, with a slight tickling sensation. I didn't cry. I just looked at her. Serena looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if trying to smile or to see more clearly. After a long time, I finally heard her call my name. Rockey. I obediently responded. Speaking was difficult for her, each word painstakingly pronounced, as if chewing on tiny shards of glass. You must live well. Live well. But what does live well mean? I don't know. So I asked. Serena was momentarily stunned. Well, I had asked a question that seemed too abrupt, and she hadn't quite thought it through. Study hard, get your diploma, find a job you like. She hesitated, seeming choked up, and spoke with some difficulty. Fall in love, get married, slowly grow old. I didn't say anything. She became a bit chatty. Don't stay up late. If you're sick, go to the hospital in time. Don't. As she spoke at the end, her voice grew softer. Rockey. I looked at her. Serena looked at me, her eyes shifting with the tumultuous sea under the night sky, the waves surging. Yet it all stopped in her calm face. At the very end, her fingertip rested on my forehead. She said, "Eat well." Rockey. Later, I followed her advice. I studied, graduated, and found a good job. I met Hailey. She confessed her feelings, and we started dating. I didn't stay up late. I just often had insomnia until midnight. I also ate properly and stopped being picky. I clearly did everything you said. Serena. But why? Am I still unhappy? Hailey wanted an answer, but I couldn't give it to her. Aren't we the same? Did you forget? When we weren't dating, you got drunk, I took you home, and you called me Little Tony. We're quite similar, aren't we? Tony told me that substitutes can never match the real thing. Hailey, don't you think so too? Hailey opened her mouth as if to say something, but no sound came out for a long time. Tony is back, and you also let go of your grudge and eloped with him. Isn't a happy ending with a big reunion good? I looked down at Hailey. Why are you still looking for me? She said, no, I took him away only out of guilt. I already. Are you going to say you fell in love with me? I interrupted her. Hailey was a bit stunned. Is this what love is like? I asked her. Is love really about making ginger soup for him on a rainy day, leaving a sick person to be with an ex-boyfriend, abandoning a current boyfriend at the wedding to face the guests' gossip and disdain? Hailey, tell me, is this love? She couldn't answer. On Tuesday, when I went to the company, Peter asked where I had been and why I took such a long leave. Grandma caught a cold, so I stayed with her a few more days. Peter patted my shoulder. You've accumulated quite a bit of work. Let me know if you need anything. I smiled and shook the file in my hand. No need. I'm resigning. Alice had recently offered me an opportunity, so I took it. Her terms were very good. Grandma is getting older, and there are many expenses. I resigned in the morning. Hailey came to see me in the afternoon. Peter happened to run into her when he was dropping me off at my newly rented place. When she saw me, her eyes flickered, and she irritably put out her cigarette. Why did you resign? An ex-girlfriend as a boss would be quite awkward. Hailey seemed amused. She had been in the business world for a long time and was always adept at handling everything. Even if she was flustered for a few moments, she could quickly regain her composure and become the calm and collected Hailey. Will it really be awkward? Rockey. She looked into my eyes, unflinching and skilled as usual. Of course not, because I don't care. I just don't want to see her face, which is 8 points similar to Serena's, anymore. I lowered my gaze and ignored her. I took out my keys to open my door, but Hailey suddenly hugged me from behind. The scent of lily of the valley mixed with cigarette smoke, enveloping me with an unquestionable attitude. Hailey buried her face in my back. Her voice was gentle. Rockey, she is just a thing of the past. Even if we look alike, the one standing in front of you now is only me. I admit I originally confessed to you because you resembled Tony, but later I also gradually realized that you are not like him. What I love is indeed you. She softly coaxed me, persuading, if you are unhappy because of him, I will never associate with him again. As long as you say so, I can do it. Don't be angry with me. Okay. Hailey's breath was a bit ragged. It fell by my ear, making my ear burn. I didn't speak, struggling free from her embrace. Hailey refused to let go, and I looked into her eyes. Hailey didn't know. Before I was 18, Rockey had no heart. Then Serena appeared. Love took root and sprouted from my heart, causing even the withered bones to grow flesh. Then she left. My heart was empty again. I fixed my gaze on the dimple at the corner of Hailey's lips, my tone calm. Hailey, you really are not even a bit like her. Hailey wasn't angry, but her face suddenly turned ashen. I ignored her and went into the house. The next day, there was no one at the door, but the ground was covered in cigarette ash. I joined Alice's company, and my daily life became quite mundane. Hailey often visited Alice's company. I noticed her gaze would fall on me, but pretended not to see. One day, after reporting my work, Alice suddenly stopped me. She pushed a beautifully wrapped gift box toward me. I frowned. From Hailey. She cleared her throat. She went abroad for a business trip a few days ago and happened to come across an auction. This watch suits you very well. The box was opened, revealing a dazzling watch face. The brilliance made it look quite valuable. I didn't move. Alice smiled. The lock on her house was removed recently. She and Tony have completely broken up. She said, President Alice. I interrupted her. She didn't continue. If you don't want to hear it, I won't say it. But she's not easy to give up. Rockey. She seems to be serious. When I came out, I happened to run into Hailey. Her gaze moved from my hand to my neck. When she found nothing, her eyes dimmed. As our eyes met, she was about to speak. Rockey. I turned my face away and walked quickly. In one day, I encountered 2 people I didn't want to see. Tony was the first, meeting me at the door after work, looking somewhat haggard. He was nothing like the pampered man I first met. Rockey. He called out to me. I stopped and asked, is there something? His eyes fell on my wrist, as if in a daze. Didn't she give it to you? She said the watch was beautiful and wanted to buy it to apologize. We had a lot of arguments. She said she loves you and only wants to marry you. She cleaned out that house, saying she wanted a clean break from me. I said you didn't love her. Do you know what she said? Tony's expression suddenly grew agitated as he stepped closer and grabbed my shoulders. She said she doesn't care. Rockey, do you know? She said as long as she loves you, it's enough. I looked at Tony's fierce expression, but felt no disturbance inside. He gripped hard, his nails nearly digging into my flesh, but I pried his hands off. You're wrong. She doesn't love me. She loves the unattainable. Once it was you, now it's me. Alice was a good boss, and Hailey appeared less frequently since that day, but her actions never ceased. It was as if she belatedly started pursuing me with various gifts to win me over. I returned everything to Alice. Alice said she had tried to persuade her, but Hailey wouldn't give up. The unattainable can easily become an obsession, especially for someone like Hailey, who might go mad after falling for it too long. A prophecy came true. Alice called me in the middle of the night. I often couldn't sleep. When she called, I was awake. Her voice came through immediately. Rockey, I'm at a bar with Hailey. She's drunk too much and is going crazy, and we can't stop her. Can you come over? Why not find Tony? Already did, but it's no use. I paused, then asked, is this a request from the boss? Alice hesitated and sighed lightly. Sorry, this is the last time. I'll make sure she doesn't come to you again. I said, okay. I arrived arrive at the bar at 3 in the morning. The room was filled with heavy alcohol fumes, with high-proof liquor spilled all over, bottles scattered. Alice was trying to stop Hailey from drinking, and another friend was persuading her. As I opened the door, Hailey staggered up from the sofa and stumbled toward me. The smell of alcohol covered her. Hailey fell into my arms. Her head hung heavily on my shoulder. This time, she didn't call me the wrong name. Rockey. Her voice was a bit hoarse, repeatedly calling my name, as if confirming the dream and reality. I responded softly. She immediately cheered up, hugging my waist and rubbing her face against mine. After a while, she spoke. What kind of person is she? I knew she was asking about Serena, but I didn't want to answer. Hailey didn't wait for my reply, letting go and looking at me. Her eyes were a bit red. Seeing such a broken expression on her face was new to me. It's not unattainable. I didn't catch that. Hailey looked up at me. She asked again, what kind of person is Serena? I remained silent. She suddenly grabbed my hand. We're very similar, aren't we? I know you like my face. It's okay. It's okay. She was drunk, speaking somewhat disjointedly. I didn't know if she was talking to me or to herself. Just liking this face is fine. What kind of person is she? Tell me, Rockey. Being a substitute is fine. Just stay by my side. She looked into my eyes, earnest and stubborn. Her gaze was like shattered glass. Please, Rockey, being a substitute is fine. Just let me stay by your side. I remained silent and pushed her away. Hailey's already pale face lost the last bit of color. She tried to grab my hand again, but I stepped back. I was wrong, Hailey. You don't resemble her at all. Alice asked me to see you, so I came. She said this is the last time. Hailey, if you don't want me to feel disgusted and irritated every time I see you, don't do this anymore. Okay. Hailey's face was pale and her body trembled. I sensed her worsening condition. Just as I was about to open the door to call Alice, she suddenly collapsed. I didn't look back. She called out to me, her voice weakened by pain. Rockey. Alice entered, calling for an ambulance and carrying Hailey. I turned and walked out. No looking back. Alice said Hailey is in the hospital. She hesitated on the phone, finally just sighing and saying she still wants to see you. I told her that if she doesn't want you to dislike her, she should stop being so clingy. I didn't respond. Alice apologized again. Sorry, I won't let her bother you anymore. The cemetery was filled with the sound of the wind. I placed the flowers for Serena. The young girl in her 20s smiled with her eyes. In the photo, I was standing in front of her, my reflection faintly visible in her eyes. Alice was still talking on the phone. I didn't catch a word she said. Then I heard her hesitantly ask, if she hadn't deceived you from the start and really wanted to be with you, would things be different now? I heard the breathing on the other end of the line. The second person's breathing was heavier. No, I replied. The call ended. It was suddenly quiet. You don't need to be in a relationship to live well, right? No one answered. The girl in the photo continued to smile warmly. The sky was high and the clouds were light. I lowered my eyes. Serena, I miss you so much. Grandma misses you too. On the day Grandma recovered, she made pumpkin cakes for me. I sat in the yard picking vegetables. The sunlight outside was good, warming me. Grandma fanned me with a palm leaf fan, swaying back and forth. Everything was fine, just missing one person. In the 5th year since Serena left, Grandma often urged me to bring a girlfriend home. Always coming here during the holidays. Where's the time to date? Her hair was graying, but her kindness and smile remained the same, calling me good boy. I laughed and went along with it. She lightly tapped my head with the fan and went to the kitchen to get the pumpkin cakes. When I looked up, the sun was directly overhead. The light was dazzling. After a high fever, I sometimes dream of Serena, 16 or 17-year-old Serena, asking me how to solve a problem, walking home with me after evening classes, holding my hand, and saying she wanted to run away with me. Her smile was like a radiant sun. In the end, it was 21-year-old Serena, pale and lying in a hospital bed, repeatedly sketching my features, over and over again, telling me to live well. Serena, you forgot. It was because I met you that my life became better. I snapped back from the brief dizziness. Grandma was calling me from inside the house. I responded and walked in, wiping the tears from my eyes as if I had never cried. A lifetime is so long. The remaining decades are just a long sentence. The end. If you enjoyed Hailey's story, please like and subscribe to Kitten's channel with updates every morning at 9 a.m.